There are people who enter a room and immediately begin performing for the invisible audience they believe is watching. Their laugh is louder than the conversation. Their stories are exaggerated versions of half-truths. Their presence is coated in a thick need to be seen, to be admired, to be validated. And beneath that need, there is often a profound emptiness that attention briefly silences, but never truly fills. To understand the psychology of the attention seeker, you have to look past the surface, past the dramatics, the selfies, the constant social media posts. The real roots are buried deeper, in places most people don't think to explore. Childhood neglect, emotional invisibility, identity wounds. This isn't about ego in the traditional sense. It's about survival. The human psyche is wired to need connection. From the moment we're born, our brains search for mirrors in the eyes of our caregivers, reflections that say, "You exist, you matter." But for some, those mirrors were either cracked or completely absent. A child who grows up in a home where they are unseen begins to develop a subconscious panic, that if they are not noticed, they will be forgotten, that if they don't perform, they will disappear. That psychological imprint doesn't fade with time. It matures into compulsions, behaviors meant to force recognition. These people may become loud, not because they enjoy being loud, but because silence terrifies them. Being overlooked is not just inconvenient, it is existentially threatening. The attention seeker doesn't always know they're doing it. On the outside, they may present as charismatic, charming, even magnetic. But inside, it's a battlefield of insecurities, each craving applause just to feel momentarily real. You'll often find that when they are alone, the performance breaks, their voice lowers, their thoughts race. They become flooded with the very thing they've been trying to outrun, their own unmet emotional needs. This craving for recognition isn't random, it's patterned. Often, it begins in environments where love was conditional. The child only received praise when they achieved something, entertained someone, or behaved in a way that pleased the adults around them. So their developing brain made a brutal calculation. If I am not interesting, I am not loved. Imagine internalizing that belief. Imagine waking up every day with the subtle terror that being invisible means being unworthy. So what do? They decorate themselves in persona. They adapt to every room like a chameleon, reading cues, performing roles, sacrificing authenticity for approval. And the more they feed on attention, the hungrier they become. Because attention is a drug that metabolizes quickly. One dose is never enough. You may notice how the attention seeker often sabotages peace. Stillness makes them feel abandoned. They might provoke arguments, create chaos, or insert themselves into crises, not for the drama itself, but for the guarantee that someone will have to look at them. Underneath this behavioral loop is a psychological structure built on two conflicting beliefs. I am not enough as I am, and I must be seen to survive. These beliefs generate a painful paradox. No matter how much validation they receive, it can never resolve the internal contradiction. They are trying to earn externally what was damaged internally. What's worse is that attention-seeking behavior often invites judgment rather than empathy. People grow tired of the theatrics. Friends and family start to distance themselves. The attention seeker begins to notice this withdrawal, and instead of self-reflection, it often triggers deeper panic. So they amplify the very behaviors that push people away. It's a tragic irony. The more they fear being ignored, the more they behave in ways that ensure it. But that cycle is not a personality flaw. It is a wound. A psychological adaptation to environments that taught them invisibility was dangerous. In some cases, especially with extreme attention-seeking patterns, there may be elements of borderline traits, histrionic tendencies, or narcissistic wounds. But most people aren't diagnosable. They're simply bruised, misunderstood. Operating from old scripts they've never been taught how to rewrite. The attention seeker may not even remember the original injury. It might have been the absence of a parent during a formative year, or the emotional abandonment masked by material comfort. Maybe it was subtle, never being asked how they felt, always being told to get over it. always watching the golden child get the spotlight. That slow erosion of emotional presence teaches a child that their inner world doesn't matter unless it entertains someone else. So they become experts in evoking reaction. The friend who always overshares, the co-worker who gossips to be the center of intrigue, the family member who creates tension before holidays just to make the event orbit around them. These aren't conscious manipulations, they're compulsive reenactments of emotional starvation. And yet, behind all this chaos is a child who just wants to be seen for who they truly are, without performing, without exaggerating, without turning themselves into a spectacle. But they've long forgotten what that feels like. They've merged attention with affection. They believe if people stop looking, they will stop existing. Psychologically, this connects with the concept of object permanence in emotional development. As children, we learn that people and love still exist even when they aren't in front of us. But if that learning is disrupted, if the only time love was offered was during high-intensity moments, then stillness begins to feel like abandonment. The person is trapped in a loop of proving they matter. And this is where the remedy begins. Not by mocking the attention seeker, not by labeling them toxic, but by understanding that beneath the attention-seeking is a deep need to feel emotionally permanent in someone's life. They need to experience what it feels like to be loved in silence, to be valid without performance, to be worth listening to even when they're not loud. The healing requires rewiring those early beliefs. It requires relationships that allow them to feel emotionally held without needing to earn it through dramatics. Therapy can be transformative, but only if the person recognizes the pattern, which many don't until the costs become unbearable. Because there is a cost. Attention-seeking eventually burns bridges. It makes people feel used. It creates social fatigue. And the attention seeker, after years of overextending themselves for applause, often ends up alone, resentful, confused, and unable to connect in meaningful ways. They don't realize that the very behaviors designed to keep them connected have become the walls that isolate them. But no one chooses this. No one wakes up and decides to crave attention like oxygen. This is conditioning, psychological muscle memory, and it can be unlearned. The first step is awareness, a brutal, raw recognition that you are performing more than you are living, that your self-worth rises and falls based on whether people are clapping, that you feel more alive being looked at than being understood. That's a hard truth, but it's also the beginning of liberation, because once you see the performance, you can step off the stage. You can begin asking, who am I when no one is watching? And if that question terrifies you, that's the exact place you need to begin. You can begin asking, who am I when no one is watching? And if that question terrifies you, that's the exact place you need to begin. Because most attention seekers don't know who they are without the eyes of others defining them. Their identity has been shaped like clay by external approval. Remove the gaze, and what's left is a shapeless self, one that's never had permission to simply exist. That hollowness isn't a flaw. It's a scar left behind by early emotional abandonment. But society doesn't help. In fact, it profits off of this. Entire industries are built on the hunger to be seen. Social media didn't create attention seekers. It industrialized them. It turned validation into a currency. It rewarded the loudest, the most dramatic, the most outrageous. And the attention seeker, already primed by their past, found an infinite mirror that never turns off. But here's the thing about mirrors. They only reflect what's shown. They don't reach into your soul and tell you who you are. They only echo performance. So the person who's addicted to being seen by the world finds themselves surrounded by people, yet still emotionally alone. Hundreds of likes, but no one to talk to at 2 a.m. Millions of views, but no real connection. It's a modern tragedy, an epidemic of empty visibility. And for the attention seeker, it reinforces the lie they've believed all along. The more I am seen, the more I will be loved. But love doesn't grow in visibility. It grows in vulnerability. And vulnerability is what most attention seekers were punished for early in life. Maybe they cried and were told to stop being dramatic. Maybe they shared feelings only to be mocked, dismissed, or ignored. So they learned a dangerous lesson. Don't be honest, be entertaining. Don't be soft. Be loud. Don't show pain. Show performance. But that facade eventually cracks, because the body keeps score. The nervous system can't be tricked forever. Chronic attention-seeking behaviors lead to burnout, anxiety, and often depression. It's exhausting to constantly try to earn something you should have received freely: acknowledgement, love, presence. And underneath the exhaustion is a grief most can name, a mourning for the childhood that never gave them what they needed to become emotionally whole. This is where the psychology becomes more surgical. The attention seeker isn't just chasing approval, they're replaying a trauma loop. Each moment of being ignored triggers the original abandonment. Each quiet room reminds them of emotional starvation. They don't just want attention, they neurologically need it to regulate themselves. It calms their hypervigilance. It proves they exist, but it's a temporary fix. Like a smoker needing a cigarette every few hours, they need another hit of visibility, another compliment, another text, another reaction. Without it, they spiral. The silence becomes deafening. Their mind races with imagined scenarios. Did I do something wrong? Am I not interesting enough anymore? Why aren't they responding? And that internal noise forces them to seek out attention any way they can, even through conflict or self-destruction. You'll often see this in relationships. The attention seeker may unconsciously pick fights, stir drama, or create false crises, not to manipulate, but to re-establish connection. Even negative attention feels better than none. Because when someone is yelling at them, at least they know they exist in that person's world. It's twisted, but to the emotionally starved mind, it feels like nourishment. And this leads to a painful realization. Attention seekers often mistake intensity for intimacy. They chase fireworks instead of foundations. They confuse passion with presence. And this is why so many of their relationships feel hollow or short-lived, because the performance can't be maintained forever. Eventually, the mask slips, and they're left hoping someone will still want them when the show is over. The remedy isn't easy. You can't just tell someone, stop seeking attention. That's like telling a drowning person to stop gasping for air. What they need is a slow, consistent reparenting process, a reconstruction of their emotional core. It starts with developing object constancy, the internalized belief that love exists even when it is not visible, that people care, even when they're not clapping. This is usually built through long-term therapeutic relationships or conscious healing partnerships. Relationships where consistency replaces chaos, where the person is seen not just when they're loud, but also when they're quiet, where they're loved not for what they do, but for who they are, even in stillness. But this also means they must face the terrifying silence they've been avoiding. They must sit with the parts of themselves they've always tried to distract others from seeing. The insecure inner child, the envy, the shame, the fear of worthlessness. It's brutal work, but it's also the doorway to becoming emotionally whole. Because only when they stop running from themselves can they begin to actually be seen, not as a performer, but as a person. Not as an echo of what others want, but as a voice of who they truly are. That kind of authenticity doesn't demand attention. It magnetizes it, not from the crowd, but from those who matter. And perhaps the most paradoxical truth of all, the more you chase attention, the less satisfying it becomes. But the more you create inner stillness, the more meaningful connection finds you. Because people don't respond to noise, they respond to presence. And presence can't be faked. The attention seeker must ask themselves, what would happen if I stopped trying to impress? Who would I be if I let the performance end? For most, the answer is terrifying, because the performance is the only self they've ever known. But it's also the false self that keeps them from experiencing real love, deep friendships, and internal peace. The journey is not about eliminating the need to be seen, it's about transforming it. From a desperate plea into a grounded expression. From a scream for help into a quiet knowing. From emptiness into embodiment. The person who once needed applause to feel alive learns to find aliveness in solitude. The one who feared silence now finds safety in it. And slowly, the addiction to attention dissolves. Not because they've become dull or detached, but because they've finally learned how to see themselves. And that's the deepest truth. Until you can witness your own worth, the world's recognition will always feel incomplete. You will always need more. And no amount of fame, praise, or followers will replace the intimacy of self-recognition. This world is not kind to those who are invisible. But chasing attention to prove your existence only creates a deeper void. You were never meant to perform your way into being loved. You were meant to exist as you are and be loved in that existence. The moment you realize that, the game changes. You stop grasping and you begin grounding. You stop shouting and you start listening to your own voice. You stop fearing the absence of others and you begin befriending your own presence. And from there, something extraordinary happens. You become the mirror you always saw.